Well, thanks to everybody who's been watching and listening to these podcasts. This is episode 12. It's been a lot of fun doing the Philly Sports Convo. And my guest today is one of my favorite guests from the old TV show I had on Channel 17. Always loved talking to this guy because this guy knows about sports. And he always says something to make me laugh, too. And he always tweets something out to make me laugh, too. He's a columnist for the Inquirer. He's a host on WIP. And he's a neighbor of mine in Bucks County, too. Mike Sielski. Mike, how are you, man? It's been too long. It's good to have you here.
It's great to be with you again, Jason. Thanks for having me.
So I got to ask you, how long have you been at this thing covering sports? Because for a young guy, it seems like you've been doing this a while.
Well, first of all, I appreciate that you called me a young guy.
It's all relative, Mike.
I'm going to be 49 in June, and I certainly don't feel like one.
Well, 51.
But okay, so we're not so far apart.
There you go.
Yeah, my first full-time job in sports writing was covering high school sports in Bucks County back in the late 1990s, 98, 99. Walked a lot of sidelines at Friday night football games, covered a lot of softball and basketball and soccer and field hockey and all of that kind of stuff back when local papers were around and thriving.
Was it the Bucks County Courier-Times?
It was the Bucks County Intelligencer at first. And then, yeah, up in central Bucks County and upper Bucks County. And then I eventually kind of moved over to the Courier and worked for the company that owned both of those papers.
I used to deliver the Courier-Times. That was the closest I got to it back when I was a kid. But this is why, Mike, you know what? I love when good things happen to good people, because you're a guy who's obviously worked your ass off all these years, and to see the success you're having, to say you deserve it is a huge understatement. I love seeing it.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for those of us of kind of our generation who came up when there was an apprenticeship to this business. When you were starting out, you had a chance to make mistakes and learn on the job. The stakes were a little bit lower. Covering high school sports didn't have the reach and the quote-unquote importance that covering the Eagles or the Sixers or the Phillies does. So I consider that a really valuable and, to be honest, very enjoyable part of my career. It's funny, I live in the Central Bucks area now, and a lot of the people who I covered back in the day when I was 22 and 23 years old and they were 18 or so are now neighbors and friends of mine.
That's really cool.
It's funny how life comes full circle.
Well, I will tell you, and I wasn't much of an athlete, still not, but I was a bowler back in high school. I went to William Tennant in Warminster, and I can tell you that whenever there was a photographer from the Bucks County Courier-Times at one of our matches, we knew about it, and it was a big deal. From the perspective of a high school quote-unquote athlete, because I was a bowler, but from the perspective of a high school athlete, to get your name in the paper, especially to get your picture in the paper, that was a huge deal back then.
Yeah, not to turn this into a, hey, back in my day podcast, but what you're saying is 100% true. And the reach of those papers, like the Bucks County Courier or the Bucks County Intelligencer, was so wide because it was the way at the time that people found out about what was going on in their community. There was no social media, obviously. There were no Facebook groups based around whatever town you happen to live in. I would cover a Friday night football game at War Memorial Field at Central Bucks West High School. Yeah. Go back to the Intelligencer office. You had to keep all your own stats. I would type them all into the computer system. I would write a game story, and thousands of people in the Bucks County area wouldn't find out who won that football game until my story came out on Sunday morning, because we didn't have a Saturday paper. I covered a game Friday night, and the story would come out on Sunday. So I know we're dating ourselves here, but it was a fun time to be in this business and to be at that level of business. All
right, well, one more high school thing, and then we've got a lot of current stuff to talk about: Phillies, Sixers, Flyers, college basketball, a lot of stuff I want to get to in our conversation here. But I remember one time when in Tennant Bowling, we had our home matches at Pike Lanes in Southampton. There was a photographer from the Courier-Times there, and I could see he was walking like in between the lanes, like in between my lane and the lane next to me, and I could tell he was setting up to take my picture, and I was a nervous wreck, and the ball slipped out of my hand. Okay, so like my arm is up here, but the ball is like, normally, you would see the ball kind of flying, but the ball is still below me and my hand's up here. Well, that was the picture that got in the paper the next morning.
Oh no!
I gotta find it and show it to you sometime. I'll have to text it to you. But I could look back on it now and laugh. But I mean,
hey, Jason, I was on the other side of that, where I thought I was going to be the Woodward or Bernstein of the high school sports beat.
Yeah.
And every Penridge Satterton field hockey game I covered, I treated like it was the Super Bowl or something.
Right.
And again. And that was one of those things that you learn at that stage of your career, is how to keep things in perspective, how to interact and talk to athletes who are reluctant to talk to you. And 16, 17, 18-year-old kids are not necessarily forthcoming.
Right.
And sometimes they can be a little too forthcoming when they know their names are going to get in the paper or something like that. So, like I said, it was a really, really good learning experience. And there are lessons that I took from that experience that I use to this day.
I love it. I love it. And I love your work, both in the paper and on the radio. A lot I want to talk to you about, and I want to tell people we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. So just after the Phillies offense sputtered through a 3-0 loss to the Cardinals with Zach Wheeler on the mound. And it seems like we're seeing a lot of the same issues this year offensively that we saw last year. How concerned are you about the lineup, and especially guys like Castellanos and Trey Turner?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned, but look, this is a long season. Baseball kind of suffers, I think, Jason, from the fact that in the age of social media, we treat every single game like it is the be-all and end-all of our existence. Our attention spans have shrunk to the point where you can't – we act like a 3-0 loss to the Cardinals is an unprecedented event. It's not. They're 5-6,
That's
I
true.
guess. They have players who aren't hitting. Look, Castellanos is really, really scuffling. Trey Turner's off to a slow start. We've got to give these guys time to be able to pull out of this. Now, I will point to a story that my friend Matt Gelb, who covers the Phillies for The Athletic and does a great job, had this morning, in which he talked to Castellanos about his slump. And one of the things that Castellanos said that was really interesting was that he felt like the accent that the Phillies have placed on not chasing bad pitches has taken away some of their aggressiveness and their ability to swing freely within the strike zone. That they're a little too cautious of the plate because they feel like they don't want to swing at any bad pitches.
Interesting
and
point.
I thought it was really interesting too. And I wonder if we're going to see an adjustment there. I really do. And I will say this too, Jason. A lot of people are focusing on Johan Rojas in center field as this guy can't be in the lineup. This guy can't hit. That to me strikes me as the wrong way to look at this. If the guys throughout the lineup are doing what they're supposed to be doing, Johan Rojas isn't going to be much of an issue.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Yep.
Johan Rojas seems to me an easy guy to point to and say, he's got to do better. He's a weak link in the lineup. And you can rant about him when the fact is that guys like Castellanos and Turner and JT Realmuto need to start hitting and hitting consistently for this team to be what everybody hopes it'll be.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And for what he gives you in center field, he's worth it. And you're right. If the rest of the lineup is doing what they're supposed to do, it should not be an issue. You're right. People are focusing on the wrong thing. What about, and again, it goes back to last year as well. It seems like with this lineup, either, if they're not hitting a home run, they're not scoring runs, they're not playing small ball. And ironically, I don't know how you felt about this, but I was pretty vocal against Kyle Schwarber in the leadoff spot. But ironically, he's the one hitting singles. He's the one trying to steal bases. And I kind of changed my tune about Schwarber at the top of the lineup. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no issue with Schwarber at the top of the lineup. I think that having a hitter like him as the number one hitter in a lineup gives you a dynamic that most leadoff hitters don't. And there are very few leadoff hitters who could hit any pitch 450 feet. Kyle Schwarber can do that. So right off the jump, the opposing starting pitcher has to be cautious at a stage of the game where chances are he might be a little rusty.
That's a good point.
Or he might be trying to get into his groove. So if he misses a location on a fastball, Schwarber's going to hit it a mile. And that's a dynamic in the leadoff spot that, as I said, teams don't often have. And so I don't mind having Schwarber there. He likes to hit there. And again, this comes back to Schwarber to me isn't the problem. The problem is Trey Turner and Nick Castellanos. Those guys have to hit.
Yeah. Turning to the pitching and specifically the bullpen, does that worry you? Dominguez seems a little shaky. Alvarado seems shaky here and there. Hoffman had a shaky outing the other night. Does the bullpen worry you at all?
I think every bullpen for every major league team is worried because they're completely unpredictable. Jeff Hoffman was terrific last season. He was kind of a savior for the Phillies. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a savior this season. Sir Anthony Dominguez had a subpar year in 2023. Doesn't necessarily mean he's not going to be striking out more than a batter per inning pitched in 2024. I think it's so early, Jason, that we get caught up in looking at a 10-game sample when that's the NFL equivalent of less than one game. Okay, if this were an Eagles season,
it's a good point.
The third or fourth quarter of the season opener. I think everybody needs to calm down, and I really believe this, that the age that we're in, where we focus so tightly on every single instant, really does the way we look at baseball a disservice. Baseball is a marathon.
Yeah,
and we shouldn't get so focused on even like a 9 or 10 game stretch like the Phillies have had so far.
No, I like that way of thinking. All right, I guess, and probably the most important question, Mike, what do you think of those City Connect jerseys?
I hate them.
Yeah,
I hate them.
I'll tell you what, I don't like the jersey, but I like the hat. I kind of like the hat. I'm not a hat guy.
I had no idea that the 1984 Seattle Mariners held this kind of sentimentality within the Philadelphia area. Well, because that's what the uniforms look like. Well, I'm waiting for Alvin Davis and Mark Langston to come out and play for the Phillies.
How about Richie Zisk?
There you go. Good pull. Very good pull.
Richie Zisk was my very first baseball glove. For some reason, I don't know why my dad got this, but it was a Richie Zisk baseball glove. That's the only reason that name popped into my head.
Mine was a Freddie Lynn, the center fielder.
Much
for the Red
better
Sox
player.
And the Angels. But no, this bothers me, Jason. I don't like these City Connect uniforms because for the most part, they don't look anything like the traditional uniforms of these ball clubs.
I agree.
One of the things that I think it's overlooked in pro sports, and you can draw this connection to any of the 4 or 5 major sports leagues, you can draw this connection to the rise of women's basketball that we've seen in the last couple of years with Caitlin Clark and the number of great players in the sport now, is that sports fans like continuity and tradition. Mm. They do. They like it. They like a player who stays 4 years at a school so that they can get to know her or him. They like the fact that the Yankees generally don't change their uniforms, and the Cardinals and the Dodgers and the Phillies don't change their uniforms. And I don't want the Phillies to look like a team that they've never looked like before in their history. I just don't. I don't like it, and I think most fans feel the same way.
Yeah, well, it's because it's the Philadelphia flag, right? The colors of the flag, the blue and the yellow. That's why they do it. And you know how many people in the Philadelphia area can tell you the colors of the Philadelphia flag? A handful.
4 people.
And
one of them's Jeffrey Lurie because he had the Eagles wear those ridiculous sky blue and yellow uniforms back in 2007.
I forgot.
So
I forgot about those.
It's all about selling merchandise.
Oh, of course.
It's all about trying to appeal to young people. And guess what? Most young people don't have money. So I don't know why we're trying to appeal to them anyway. Yeah. All right, old man rant over.
No, listen, I'm an old man too because I agree with you. But I'll tell you what, and you mentioned something that you don't like. People don't like when the Phillies change uniforms. I wish the Phillies would go back to the 70s, the throwback design, like the powder blues, that P. For some reason I love that design from the 70s and 80s, and I wish they would go back to it full time.
I don't mind that once in a while because at least it harkens back to the past. I wouldn't want it full time. I like their uniforms now. I even like the ones that kind of harken back to the 50s and 60s with the Phillies across the front with the red and the blue against kind of the eggshell white.
Yeah, I do like that. The alternates.
But this is more uniform discussion than I had anticipated on this show, Jason. I got to be honest.
We're gonna cover everything, Mike. Cover everything. But before we get off of baseball, I do want to ask you this. All kidding aside, all the injuries with pitchers. Spencer Strider now, all these pitchers have to have Tommy John surgery, and the Players Association is saying it's the pitch clock. But, if you think back, and here's an old man rant, back in the day, they pitched at that pace anyway, and nobody blew out their arms. So what's the reason? Is it just, because every pitch is 100 miles an hour? What do you think is the reason for all these injuries?
Yes, I think you're 100% right. I don't think the pitch clock has much to do with it. I agree with my colleague Dave Murphy, who had a column on Inquirer.com and in the paper today about this. The way that pitchers are evaluated now is, do you throw hard with movement? Well, guess what? It takes a lot out of a pitcher and his arm to throw 95 to 100 miles an hour with movement.
It's not natural.
It's not natural. You're asking the human body to do something it generally cannot do. Or if it can do it for a certain period of time, it will stop or break.
Yep.
And that's what's happening here. One of the things I've lamented for a long time about baseball, and it's been nice in the last couple of years to see the major leagues taking steps toward getting back to this in this regard, is diversity of styles of play. Okay, I miss the days when a team would be known for stealing bases and playing small ball, or another team would be known for its pitching, or another team would be known for having home run hitters.
Yeah.
And I really, really miss pitchers of differing styles. I miss knuckleballers. I miss submariners. I miss crazy, crafty lefties.
I like the sidearmers. Remember that? Kent Tekulve.
Yeah. Everybody throws 95 to 100 now, or at least 9 out of 10 pitchers do. And that's the big reason you're seeing these arms fall apart. And until at the lower levels of the sport, we stop evaluating kids just based on whether they can throw an 87-mile-per-hour slider when they're 15 years old, this is going to continue happening.
No, I agree. I saw Bob Costas a while back. Somebody asked him about, why back in the day did a guy like Robin Roberts have 28 complete games in one season, and you would never see, more than a handful per pitcher, if that much these days. And he talked about the velocity, but he said that back in the day, how did he put it? He said back in the day, the guys used their heaters, the 95, 100 mile an hour pitches. They used it situationally. Like if there's 2 outs and you're facing the 8-hole hitter, you're not going to waste a 95 mile per hour fastball on him. You used it purposefully. You used, if you had men on base or whatever, and that's how those guys were able to last so long and throw so many complete games. But you're right. These days, it's every single pitch, and it at some point you gotta figure things do have to change. It can't keep going like this, can it?
I don't think it can, and I'm waiting for the smart baseball executive or executives who exploits this kind of like stagnant system, right? That's what Moneyball was all about. It's like, find the thing that can help you win games that nobody else is thinking of. And I wonder if at some point down the pike, pitcher durability or pitching styles are going to be that thing that an executive, somebody involved with the sport, understands to be the thing that can help them win in the long term.
Right.
Because it's a problem and it needs to be solved.
It's funny you mentioned Moneyball. That kind of segues into what I want to ask you about. The Oakland A's. That whole situation, I don't get it. I mean, first of all, okay, they're moving to Vegas, fine. But, I mean, Vegas, if you think about it, is a smaller television market than Oakland, but that's besides the point. But they're moving to Sacramento until everything in Vegas is ready, and they're playing in a minor league ballpark, and the ballpark may not be ready till like 28 or 29, so they could be playing there for 4 or 5 years. And are free agents really going to go there when they're playing in a minor league ballpark? So they're going to stink for the next 4 or 5 years before they get to Las Vegas. I mean, it's an embarrassment to baseball, or am I being too dramatic about that?
No, I think it is a bit of an embarrassment. It would have been something that happened. Look, it's happened with this franchise for years and years, right? They started out in Philadelphia. They went to Kansas City. They went to Oakland. They've been in Oakland forever, and now they're going to go to Sacramento to Las Vegas. this is all about stadium money. This is all about billionaires, or at least one particular billionaire, trying to make as much money as he possibly can. It makes my stomach churn that these guys who make all this money and are worth so much money need public dollars or want public dollars to try to build a stadium or a pleasure palace or something like that. So, yeah, it is an embarrassment, and it's a shame for people who love the A's. But, I don't know what the solution is except to dissolve the franchise.
It just reeks of the Montreal Expos back in the day. Remember before the Expos moved, they decimated the team. The team sucked, so people don't go to the games. Then the owner says, well, nobody goes to the games. We can't attract a crowd. We got to move. Well, when Montreal was good in before the strike in 94, they were filling up Olympic Stadium. And back in the day when the A's were good, they were filling up the Coliseum. It is a shame. It is a shame.
Yeah, the A's history in that regard is a little more spotty. Even when they were winning championships in the early 70s, for instance, that three-peat from 72 to 74, they were not drawing people in like you would have thought. Oakland, I think if you go back and look at their attendance numbers, it's not like they were selling out every night the way the Phillies do when they're good, or the Yankees or Cubs, or the Dodgers are a different ball game in some ways. They sell out games when people arrive in the third inning and leave in the seventh. So
yeah, right.
So I don't know how much Oakland really supported that team in the way some major league teams are supported by their fan bases.
I don't know if you remember, for a while on York Road in Hatboro, there was the Philadelphia A's Historical Society. It was like a museum, and every time, and I don't live too far from there. Every time I drive past there, I'm like, I got to go in there one of these days. Then all of a sudden it closed. So. I missed my shot.
I was in there a few times, and I actually did a story for the Bucks County Courier-Times back in 2010.
Okay.
About the Philadelphia A's answer to Moonlight Grant. They had a guy who played Harry O'Neill. He caught one half inning of one game for the A's and never got to play again in the major leagues, never got to bat. And then he went on and served in Iwo Jima and was killed at Iwo Jima.
Oh, wow.
Too. And he was from Delaware County. He was from Darby. He'd gone to Gettysburg College. He was this amazing story, and he was kind of the Philadelphia answer to Moonlight Grant from Field of Dreams.
Wow. Well, I gotta Google that. Think I can still find that?
It's out there somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, it's out there somewhere, I think.
All right. You find the best stories, Mike. All right. I want to ask you about move to the Sixers. Are you back on the bandwagon? I'm not going to lie. I totally given up on them. I don't know if it's my Philadelphia fan cynicism. I've been a Philadelphia sports fan my whole life, but they're kind of reeling me back in.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about them too, and that comes with the obvious caveat that they haven't gotten out of the second round of the playoffs, and you never know about Joel Embiid's health and all of that stuff. But I think top to bottom, they're probably better this season when they have everybody than they've been the last couple of years. And with this version of Embiid, with this version of Tyrese Maxey, with the better defense that they have around the roster. Look, they're 30-8, I think, with Embiid and Maxey in the lineup.
Yeah.
I think I have that right. So that's really hard to overlook. I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs, even with that history behind them. And if they get the right draw, I assume they're going to be in the play-in and probably host a game, at least host the first game. But I wouldn't want to play them if I were the Celtics or the Bucks or any other team in the Eastern Conference, because the specter hanging over them, that hung over them the last couple of years about how they're expected to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, or expected to get to the finals, that's not there this year because Embiid has been out so much and they've been so beat up with injuries. I would think they would come to the postseason with less pressure, and that might make them dangerous.
No, that's a good point. And it seems like Embiid, if it's possible, he's come back better after his injury than he was when he went out. Like you said, Maxey's been on fire lately. And I mean, listen, I still, obviously, you still have to think Boston is the favorite in the East, but beyond Boston, it seems like especially with the Giannis injury now too, it seems like the East is pretty much wide open. They can make a pretty deep run, I would think.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the draw and where they end up and who they end up playing in the first round and how the rest of the conference shakes out. It's an interesting time in the NBA in that regard, Jason. There's not a clear-cut, it's this team, it's the Curry Durant Klay Thompson Warriors and everybody else. It's not the Lakers or Celtics of the 80s and everybody else. There are a number of teams that if things break their way could make a deep run. We saw that last year, right? The Miami Heat, the 8th seed, who were in the play-in games, end up going to the finals and knocking out the Celtics on the way. So the league has gotten interesting in that.
What do you think of Nick Nurse as a head coach?
Like him a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Really like him a lot. Really like the way he coaches in games. Go back and watch some of those inbounds plays against the San Antonio Spurs the other night. That buzzer-beating layup that Tyrese Maxey hit off that really creative inbounds look with a couple of seconds left and whatever it was, regulation or maybe the first overtime. Really well designed and drawn up by Nurse. I think he's a really good coach. I think he's an upgrade over Doc Rivers, and I think they're lucky to have him.
So if the Sixers don't get a title, say in the next 2-3 years, looking back on the process, what do you think? Would you call it a failure? How would you consider the process?
I would consider it a lot of missed opportunities. It was sound in theory. I would have loved to have seen what would have happened if Sam Hinkie had stayed and not, in a way, forced to resign. He walked away in his own, but I think he saw the writing on the wall. I would have been really curious to see how he continued to build the roster. But the fact is, you had 2 number 1 overall picks in the draft, and you took 2 guys who couldn't shoot. You drafted Jahlil Okafor when you might have gotten Kristaps Porzingis.
That's a good point.
You traded away Jimmy Butler. So many missed opportunities. You hitched your wagon to Tobias Harris for a max contract.
Yeah.
So, people can say the process didn't work, and you can blame Sam Hinkie all you want, but when he walked away, when he left, the Sixers were loaded with assets, and they managed to waste most of them, not all of them, except Joel Embiid.
No, you're right. That's a good point. So what would you consider a successful season to be for the Sixers, knowing what you know now, that Embiid's back, that it looks like, there is kind of a path in the East, at least, until you get to Boston maybe. What would you consider a successful season?
Conference finals.
Okay.
As much as we talk about the pressure being off them, if you get to the second round and lose, it's just another wasted season with Embiid.
Right.
You've got to take advantage of him while he's here and in his prime. And that's where he is right now. Look, I was at that game last night against the Pistons. It was kind of a ho-hum performance for him, and he had 32 points in 31 minutes. This is just what the guy does.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to take advantage of him being there. And I would think it would have to be at least the conference finals for them to consider this a success.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Real quick, moving to the college game. Obviously the women's final was very entertaining, and the story came out, I guess, late yesterday into this morning, that the women's final actually had higher ratings than the men's final. So Caitlin Clark and, of course, Phillies' own Dawn Staley, what have they done to elevate women's basketball?
Well, they've done something that the sport needed for a long time, which was they gave people other elite rooting interests or just institutions to be interested in other than UConn and Tennessee. That's what the sport needed. Give another Philly area guy, Gino Auriemma, a ton of credit
absolutely.
for being the North Star, turning UConn into the program
Norristown's own.
North Star. Was the North Star of the sport for a long, long time, and it gave these other programs something to strive toward. And then, so Dawn Staley comes along and lifts South Carolina into a dynasty, and now Caitlin Clark comes along and plays in a way that draws the attention and the interest and the joy of millions of people around the country. And that's what that sport needed to really enter the full mainstream of American interest and culture. And I'm not surprised that the women's championship game and the Final Four games drew more viewers than the men, because the women have more stars as players.
Yep.
That's the thing you have to remember, Jason, is that college basketball on the men's side talks about rivalries all the time between Duke and North Carolina and Kentucky and the Blue Bloods and all this kind of stuff. Well, in the women's game, those rivalries trickle down to the players themselves. You saw trash talking amongst players on LSU and Iowa, and Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, and who's better, really, Caitlin Clark or Paige Buchers? And those are the kind of storylines that people who follow sports love. They love heroes or heroines and villains. And that's what the women's game had, and it had many, many more of them than the men's game did.
Yeah, it was very entertaining. And I'll tell you what, before the Sixers hired Nick Nurse, and don't get me wrong, I'm glad Nick Nurse is here, as we said. You know, we're both fans of his.
I know exactly what you're going to say. Go ahead.
I wanted Dawn Staley to coach the Sixers. I think she'd be a phenomenal NBA coach.
I think she could do it. I absolutely think she can do it. And I don't think she's the only one. You know, Becky Hammon has experience in San Antonio. She could probably do it. I think more and more players nowadays, younger players, the era of today, wouldn't look sideways at a female head coach, even at the basketball's highest level. You know, it would have been different back in the 70s or 80s, but I think now it's certainly possible.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's eventually going to happen. It's eventually going to happen.
I agree. I totally agree. And before we wrap up the college basketball conversation, I don't know if I saw this on Twitter, I forget, or if you put it in the paper, I forget where I saw this, but you said Iron Eagle is so much better than Jim Nantz. Explain that. I mean, and I'm a fan of both, by the way. I'm a fan of both. But go ahead.
I just think Iron Eagle is a better broadcaster than Jim Nantz at this stage. I think he's better on college basketball. I think he's better on basketball, period. He does a lot of NBA as well. And I think he's better on football. I'm not a fan of Jim Nantz. I'm tired of the hokey.
Hello, friends.
Contrived hello, friends. When he does college basketball, he doesn't sound like he fully knows and is familiar with what's been going on in the sport, where I think Iron Eagle is. And I just like Eagle better. I think the move was a long time coming. And I'm glad that I don't know Ian at all. I've never met him, but I'm glad that he got a shot, because I'm interested and enjoy listening every time he's calling a game.
And you didn't like Jim Nantz's call of Chris Jenkins' buzzer beater? I saw that too, right?
Yeah, no, I liked it right up until the moment Jenkins hit the shot, and then Nantz wouldn't shut up.
You know, it's funny you mention that. And, oh gosh, it was J.P. Dellacamera, the guy, he did union games when they still had local broadcast before Apple TV took over. One of the things that I've talked to him before, one of the things I love about him, and Pat Summerall was the same way, Merrill Reese does this too, the really good broadcasters know when not to talk and when to let the pictures tell the story. Even on the radio, with no pictures, sometimes you even let the sound tell the story. Scott Fransky sometimes will shut up for a while after a big moment. The true broadcasters not only know how to punctuate a call, but they know when to sit back as well. Yeah,
it's another reason why I can't stand Tony Romo. Won't shut up.
I agree with you on.
Yeah, go back and watch the overtime touchdown in that Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the 49ers. And I was there, and I didn't hear the call in real time, but I went back and watched the game on, the replay on CBS. That was awful. It was just awful. Like, nobody wants to hear your breakdown of this play a second and a half after the Chiefs have won the Super Bowl, Tony. Be quiet and let people absorb the moment. And I feel the same way about Nantz. I just felt like he got so he's in his latter years, he started to come off to me as the stereotypical Ted Baxtery, Ron Burgundy kind of, hey, welcome, friends, I'm here. Whereas Iron Eagle can laugh at himself a little bit, and I'm a big proponent of self-deprecation. I think it shows somebody is honest about who they are, and
absolutely
they don't take themselves too seriously, and I like that.
And I'll tell you what, you just made me remember Iron Eagle's son, Noah Eagle.
Noah.
Did you happen to watch the Nickelodeon broadcast of the Super Bowl? Noah Eagle was doing the play-by-play with, oh my gosh.
Nate Burleson?
Yeah, thank you. Nate Burleson, yeah. But with SpongeBob and Patrick in the booth as well. And it was brilliantly done. Brilliant.
I like Noah Eagle a lot. I've heard him call a number of games. I don't love the Nickelodeon. I've never watched the Nickelodeon broadcast of that game.
It just made me laugh.
Of games, yeah. I haven't seen.
All right, I do want to ask you before we stop talking basketball. I see you got your book back there. Tell us about the book. I mean, it's The Rise. It's all about, and forgive me because
hold on a minute.
It's a long title and I forget the title, Mike. What is it?
Here we go.
It's The Rise.
The Rise: Kobe Bryant and the Pursuit of Immortality. Get it wherever you buy your books. It's been out since 2022.
What is?
And I actually go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I just finished the manuscript for my next book that's coming out in February, which is going to be called Magic in the Air: The Myth, the Mystery, and the Soul of the Slam Dunk. It's kind of a history of basketball through the slam dunk. So a lot of Julius Erving, David Thompson.
Gosh, that's a great topic.
Yeah, college basketball, banning the dunk in the 60s, a guy who was on the 1936 U.S. Olympic team who popularized the dunk, Michael Jordan in the 88 dunk contest.
Any Daryl Dawkins in there? Smashing the backboards?
Very, very little.
Okay.
I wrote about some things that kind of interested me. And,
got it.
Once you write that Daryl Dawkins smashed some backboards, there isn't a whole lot more.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. That's a good point. But I'm curious. And obviously, I'm sure obviously you talked a lot to Kobe. You spent some time with him. Leading up to the book. Is there something about Kobe Bryant that the average fan, those of us, wouldn't know?
That's a good question.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just curious.
No, it's okay. I think most people don't really understand how committed he was to being the athlete that he turned out to be at such a young age. People hear the Mamba mentality and they think that was something that he developed once he was an adult. And the fact is that this was a different cat from the moment he could pick up a basketball. There's an anecdote in the book. It's my favorite anecdote in the book, where when Kobe was 15 or 16, he and a friend, an older friend, would drive around to playgrounds and parks in the city and around the city, and they would play. And the friend would rebound for Kobe, and he would scream at Kobe, "You're soft. You go to a white school. You couldn't play in the public." And Kobe wanted him to do this so that he would be better prepared to handle trash talk and those kind of high pressure situations as he advanced in his basketball career. And I think you could draw a straight line between that anecdote and that famous moment that we see online often, Jason, where the Lakers are playing the Orlando Magic and Kobe is standing in front of Matt Barnes when Barnes is going to inbound the ball, and Barnes fakes like he's going to throw the ball into Kobe's face. And Kobe's standing like a foot away from him, and Kobe doesn't flinch.
Wow.
I think that's how you get to that point. And I don't think most people understand how long it took and how much he had to sacrifice and maybe how much he had to give up in terms of the person he might have been to get to that point.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right about that. Did you happen to hear, and there was a report came out this morning that it's since been corrected, but the statue that they put outside Crypto.com Arena in LA, the Kobe statue, had spelling errors on it. Did you hear about that?
I had heard about that.
How does that happen?
No idea. You would think in a situation like that mistakes would be impossible. Yeah. But I guess nothing's impossible anymore.
Yeah, it took them a few weeks, but they finally did correct it. I want to move on to the Flyers because, and again, we're recording this Wednesday afternoon, shortly after that debacle in Montreal, 9-3, and this is a team that has been on the outside looking in for a little while now in terms of the playoff picture. Only a handful of games left. You would think there'd be a sense of urgency, and they come out with an effort like that last night. I know you wrote recently about John Tortorella and maybe his time. Maybe he wouldn't be here a long time. Did he lose the locker room? Is this coaching, Mike? What do you think?
I think coaching is a little part of it in that I think Torts drives every team he has to just about their breaking point, if not past it. I covered him a little bit in New York, and I saw this with the Rangers. In 2011, 2012, that season, they were the best team in the regular season in the league. They were like second or third in the league in block shots and second and third in the league in hits. And they just ground teams into dust night after night. And then they got to the conference semifinals and they didn't have anything left. And I think for this Flyers team, there's a bit of that going on. They had some injuries, but I think for the most part, they just ran out of gas. And I think there's something to be said for the idea that the coach kept his foot on the pedal until there was nothing left in the tank. I also think that the way this has ended has to give Danny Briere and Keith Jones at least a little pause about the future, right? Like, they were going to have to make changes anyway, but man, you got to ask yourself how deep those changes are going to have to be when you're losing games like this at this point in the season. I suppose there's an argument you could make that they've just regressed to their mean and they're going to turn out to be the team they were always supposed to be, that wasn't going to make the playoffs and, took some nice steps forward. But the fact is that they were right on the brink of making the playoffs, and then the bottom fell out. And they've been losing badly to teams that are terrible, like Montreal and Chicago and Columbus and Buffalo. And that's not good. And I wonder what it tells Briere and Jones about what they really need to do to get the franchise to where it wants to be.
Now, we know Tortorella's bounced around, and like you said, he eventually wears teams out, and that's why he's bounced around so much. But doesn't it normally take, 4 or 5 seasons before the team gets tired of him? It hasn't been that long, but you think that's what's happening here? They've just had it with him.
I don't know if they've had it with him. I just wonder if he pushes them so hard that they have nothing left to give, whether they're willing to give it or not. I think those breaking points, though, can come relatively quickly. I referenced his time in New York.
Yeah.
They were the best team in the league in 2012, and the following year they got back to the playoffs and were playing the Bruins. And Tortorella ripped one of his players publicly and benched the team's highest paid player, Brad Richards, who had won a Stanley Cup for him in Tampa. And within a week of that team losing in the second round of the playoffs, he was fired.
Right.
And the past follows him everywhere he goes, and he's acknowledged that. But the past sometimes can be prologue, too. And, I know he's part of this process of helping Jones and Briere weed out the guys who aren't going to be here long term, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the guys who are going to come in are going to be able to handle Tortorella either.
How much of a mulligan do you give him and give the team overall because of the goaltending situation? Obviously, nobody expected that Carter Hart wouldn't be here anymore. Sam Ersson didn't expect to be the starting goaltender. It took a while before they got a viable backup to Ersson. How much of that do you take into consideration when you look back on the season and kind of rate how things went?
Yeah, it was a factor. And it was a factor they knew was possible, right? Like, before the season began, there was speculation that Carter Hart might be charged with sexual assault, which he was, and wouldn't be available. And they took that opportunity to try to find out about Sam Ersson and, toward the end, Ivan Fedotov. They found out that Cal Peterson and Felix Sandstrom aren't part of their future.
Right.
So I suppose that's useful knowledge. But in the end, it didn't help them get themselves to the playoffs. They found out that Sam Ersson was overworked and Fedotov couldn't adjust quickly enough, and I don't blame him. But they took that chance, and it didn't work out.
So if the Flyers don't make the playoffs, now granted, before the season, nobody expected them to, but then, as you said, during the season, they were in the playoff picture. Is it a disappointment at this point?
Yeah, I think it is, because of where they were and the stage of the season that they were in when the bottom fell out. If they had started out by losing their first 8 games and then playing well over the next 73, that's different from playing well over your first 71 and then potentially bottoming out over your final 11 games. It just is. People can talk about it in terms of a full 82-game season, but it's just different.
So if they don't make the playoffs, you said it's going to give Jones and Briere some pause. Do they make a move, or does he get one more year?
Oh, I think Tortorella will be back next year. I believe that to be the case. I'm actually working on a column right now that will make that suggestion based on some reporting that I've done. But that doesn't mean he's going to make it through the season, and it doesn't mean that he's going to be the guy when Matvei Mishkov and some other guys who aren't even in the organization yet start to establish themselves as the real future of this team.
Mm-hmm. I miss playoff hockey, man.
So do I.
I grew up I grew up in this town. I grew up going to the Spectrum. I went to playoff games at the Spectrum, and man, I love playoff hockey. I love playoff hockey, and I miss it.
I love it everywhere it's played. I say this to high school students and college students all the time who ask me, what's your favorite sport to cover? I say, I don't really have a favorite sport. I have a favorite event, and it is an NHL playoff game. It is like being inside a pot of boiling water, and when the home team scores a goal, the lid blows off the pot.
Yep.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah. How about, okay, let's get a little more specific. Playoff hockey, overtime. Sudden death. Is there anything better than sudden death overtime in the playoffs? I mean, you're literally on the edge of your seat.
It's only great if you are watching it without working. When you are writing on deadline, it's terrible.
That's true.
I'll tell you that.
You weren't writing back when they had the 5 overtime game in Pittsburgh. That was what, in 2000, right?
Yeah, no, I wasn't writing then, but I covered the one when the Flyers beat the Capitals in Game 7 in 2008 in the first round when Joffrey Lupul scored.
Okay.
To send them on to the second round, and in 2004 when Simone Gagne scored in Game 6 against Tampa to force Game 7 in the conference finals. That game was particularly difficult because Keith Primo scored with less than 2 minutes to go, and I had a whole column written about how the Flyers made this valiant effort, but they got too injured and couldn't finish off the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then all of a sudden they were on to Game 7, and so had to do some fancy tap dancing on the keyboard that night.
That must happen to you a lot. I guess it's an occupational hazard, as they say. You write a column, and then something happens, and boom, you got to rewrite it.
I tell this story all the time, Jason. The worst, I'll tell you 2 quick ones. In 2005, you might remember this. That was the year after the Eagles went to the Super Bowl, and Terrell Owens was causing havoc with them. And Andy Reid had just suspended T.O., and the Eagles were playing the Dallas Cowboys on Monday night, and they were up 20-7 with less than 4 minutes to go in regulation. And I had a whole column written about how, they had kept their playoff hopes alive, and they had not allowed the distraction of Terrell Owens to bother them. And in the final 4 minutes of that game, the Cowboys scored a touchdown to make it 20-14. Donovan McNabb threw an interception that Roy Williams returned for a touchdown.
Oh, man.
On that play, Donovan tore his groin.
Yes.
Lost for the rest of the season. Coy Detmer then drove the Eagles back down the field and got within range for David Akers to try a long field goal, and Akers missed it on the last play of the game. So after that game, I had 5 minutes to rewrite my entire column.
Man.
For the Bucks County Courier-Times. I still don't know what I wrote to that day. And then when Chris Jenkins hit the shot for Villanova to beat North Carolina in the national championship, I had a cup of coffee bounce in the air next to my laptop, and it almost spilled all over my laptop.
Oh, man.
But it didn't, and I was able to finish writing that column, too.
Wow. You should write a book just about some of these newspaper stories. I mean,
people would pick that book up and go, "What are newspapers?"
Oh, well, you know what? Don't get me started on that, because I'm old-fashioned. Okay, I don't read a paper online. I like holding the paper. Okay, I like when my fingers get ink on them and I leave fingerprints. My wife doesn't like it, but when I leave fingerprints all over the place, I'm old-fashioned like that. I love holding a newspaper.
I love reading, but I love reading, and I read books, actual books. But I've broken the habit of reading the actual newspaper a long time ago. I can't do it anymore.
See, who's the old man now, Mike?
Good point.
So, okay, real quick before I let you go, did you get into the WrestleMania stuff? Are you into that? Did you go down there?
I didn't go down there. I didn't watch wrestling as a kid. It looked like, people loved it. I totally appreciate that it's something that tons of people enjoy. And, I was not surprised to see Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson participating in the festivities.
Yeah.
I looked at that whole situation and said to my 2 sons, "Hey guys, see that one guy? He was Maui in Moana. Remember Moana when you guys were little watching that movie? That's who. There's Maui, the guy who did the voice." But that was about it. That was all my interest.
Oh, that's cool. I watched wrestling as a kid, but I don't know. Ever since, like when we were kids, because we're only a couple years apart. When we were kids, it's like it was understood that it was fake, but they still tried to give off the illusion that it was real and that these were athletes and it was a sport. And now it's like they don't even hide the fact that it's entertainment. It's in the name. World Wrestling Entertainment. But it still seemed like a couple of friends of mine went down there. It still seemed like it was a fun time down there.
People love it. They do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because this guy that I work with, I said to him, "You're watching wrestling at a football stadium. How much are you really seeing?" And he said, "Well, it's on the Jumbotron." I'm like, "So you're watching it on television is what you're doing, right? You're going down there." But I guess, but it's the atmosphere. So I get all that.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
All right. Just to wrap this up, I want to ask you about your work on WIP. Was radio always something you wanted to do? Did it just happen? How did it happen? Because you and Glenn are great together. You got great chemistry. You could tell there's a mutual respect there, and it's a good listen.
Thanks. No, it was not something I had given any thought to until Glenn approached me about it. It was almost a year and a half, 2 years ago now. I knew Ray was retiring, and Glenn approached me and said, "Hey, would love for you to come on and do Saturdays with me. I think it would maintain the same tone and generally the same kind of content that he and Ray did." And to be honest, Jason, it was the only show that I listened to on WIP in real time.
Oh, they were great together.
I would go back. Yeah, I would go back and listen to podcasts whenever someone interesting was doing an interview on WIP. If there was a writer or an expert or former player who was saying interesting things. If someone like that was being interviewed on IP, I would go back and listen. But I didn't listen to talk radio very much in real time, except for Ray and Glenn, because I liked the style of the show that they did, and I've really tried to make sure that the transition from Glenn and Ray's show to ours has been seamless. And I appreciate you saying that you enjoy it.
How much pressure was there for you? I mean, you want to talk about big shoes? Those shoes are enormous.
I honestly didn't feel that very much.
Okay,
only
good.
Because I knew in the back of my head I couldn't try to be Ray, and
right.
I wasn't going to try to be Ray. There was no way my size 9 feet were going to fit into his Joel Embiid size sneakers, and it wasn't going to make sense for me to even try. And so I was going to be who I am. I'm going to, there are some areas I feel like that Ray and I are very similar. And there are some areas where we are very dissimilar, and in good ways. I mean that. But I was never going to try to be Ray or try to not be Ray. I was just going to try to be me and hope that was enough. And that's all you can do.
Yeah, well, you're right. And I want to tell you something that you and Ray, both, you guys are identical in this respect. Listening to Mike Sielski on the radio, that's exactly who you are off the air. Like, a lot of radio hosts, do shtick. They put on, I don't want to say they put on an act, but they kind of kick it up a notch when they get on the radio, and they try to be extra controversial. But, you are you on the air. You're real. Ray was real. You're real. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're resonating so well on the air.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll tell you the reason why I try to do the job that way, Jason. And this is going to sound sappy and sentimental, but it's the truth.
That's okay. Go for it.
It's that my mom and dad listen every Saturday, and they read every single thing that I write. And I would never want to do anything publicly or even privately, of course, that would embarrass them.
That's not sappy at all, Mike. That's
what they think, and what my wife and my kids and my friends think matters a lot to me. And I don't want anyone ever to come away from something I've said or done publicly and say, "Boy, Mike, you really embarrassed us there."
Right.
Or, I had to explain this to my friends or to this perfect stranger or something along those lines. And that's something that's always in the back of my mind. And
no, that makes sense.
That's the reason I try to do it the way that I do it.
So, but having said all that, do you get feedback from your parents, from your wife, from your kids? Do you get feedback from friends about your work, whether newspapers or radio?
I get a lot of feedback from my friends and colleagues and readers. I get a lot of feedback from my mom and dad. My wife and kids do not read a word that I write and don't listen to the radio at all.
Really?
Yeah, my wife is not a sports fan in any regard, and I love that about her.
Okay.
It is. I don't know if I could handle it if I were.
Well, you can watch the games by yourself.
Right. If I were spending all day covering an Eagles game and just poured out 900 words into a column and then drove home and got home and walked through the door and had Kate Sielski saying to me, why the hell didn't they bench Jalen Hurts? I would have been divorced within a year. So I'm very, very grateful that my wife, has no interest in any of that stuff, and that I can just kind of turn it off when I need to when I'm on.
I love that. It's funny. I also get feedback from my family, both positive and negative, but I get a lot of feedback from my father, and it's usually when I'm on television, and it's got nothing to do with my performance on the air. It has to do with what I'm wearing. Okay, my dad. I'll get a text. I literally, and I still have it in my phone. I'll get a text from my dad saying, "Listen, don't ever wear that shirt and tie combination ever again." My dad is like he's like an 80-year-old Mr. Blackwell, basically.
My dad always gives me, when he pushes back on stuff, it's because he feels like I've been too hard or a little unfair toward an athlete or a coach or something like that.
I don't recall you ever being hard or unfair on an athlete at all. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to be. I try not to write hot takes.
Right.
Now, the column I'm writing right now, as we're talking about the Flyers, is very sarcastic in the first paragraph. I fire off some one-liners at them.
But I love your sarcasm, Mike. It's entertaining.
But I also I throw the caveat in there. Look, if you're a Flyers fan and you can't laugh now, then the only choice you have is to, bury your face in the belly of like a paprika-colored mascot. So, I try to temper all of that. It takes a lot for me to get really, really angry about something. That's one thing I found, Jason. I don't know if you feel this way in your career. The older I get, the harder it is to get me really angry or worked up about something related to sports.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you. When I hear people, if the Eagles lose a playoff game or whatever, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm disappointed, but it's a game. My life will go on. I'm gonna wake up and go to work tomorrow. It's a game. That's all it is.
That's exactly right. When I'm sarcastic on social media or make jokes on social media, I get a lot of people who say to me, "This is not a time to joke." Like, hey, lighten up. It was just a game.
Exactly. And and I promise I'm going to let you go. I've kept you a long time. But you on social media, you crack me up. And you crack me up in how you handle the haters. Okay? Everybody gets hate on social media. I don't care how good or bad you are in whatever job you do. Everybody gets hate because people have those Twitter muscles, as they say. But you hit them back with sarcasm, but not like, not mean. You just, snarky, funny sarcasm. And I love that.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I try to use self-deprecation as much as I can because it gives somebody like that nowhere to go.
That's exactly right.
It's a really cool judo move.
Yep.
To use their anger and hate against them. If you show that it doesn't bother you, and it doesn't bother me, and I might as well just kind of roll with it. You're the stupidest person in Philadelphia sports. You're the stupidest person that Philadelphia sports media has encountered in the last 10 years. It's very easy for me to say 10 years, I'm the dumbest person of the last half century. Because you're some rando anonymous person on Twitter. Why should I care what you think?
Right.
I mean, and look, there's an argument to be made that I should care because I want those people to read what I'm writing and listen to me on the radio and buy my books and all that kind of stuff. But if you're going to approach it that way, with that amount of vitriol, then, there's nothing I can do to persuade you that I'm operating in good faith.
And like you said, that automatically diffuses him. What's he going to say to that? What's he going to say?
Yeah.
All right, last question, and I want to go back to radio. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, because you being a newspaper guy and now being successful on the radio, why are so many newspaper guys so successful? I mean, you look at the roots of sports talk radio in Philadelphia. You got Angelo Cataldi, you got Mike Missinelli, you got your partner Glenn Macnow, you got Al Morgani. Why are so many newspaper guys? Why do they translate so well? Because let's face it, you're not a broadcaster by trade. You never wanted to get into broadcasting, but yet here you are, and all these other guys are doing well on the radio.
Well, some of them aren't doing the radio anymore. I mean,
Angelo retired.
Yeah, Angelo retired.
And Al is semi-retired.
And Mike may or may not be getting back into it. But the new generation doesn't have that kind of journalistic background. I think part of it is that when you work as a journalist, you have to learn how to talk to people. And
good point.
When you love sports, what is sports but not debating it and discussing it all the time at family parties, in the bar, with your dad or your mom or whoever. So that translates a lot. And I think from a journalistic background, I think that is a huge help because it allows you to think about and understand what's going on with sports in a way that connects you with what's really happening. I don't think it's a coincidence that Glenn and I don't traffic in hot takes very much.
Right.
Because we've been around long enough and we've been in enough locker rooms to understand the realm of the real, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to offer a take just for the sake of getting people riled up. It's not who I am, and it's not what I would do in a column, so I'm not really going to be inclined to do it on the radio either.
No, makes a lot of sense. Well, everybody, make sure you read Mike in the Inquirer. Listen to him Saturdays 10 to 1 on WIP with Glenn Macnow. Mike, I always enjoy when we get to talk, and it's really cool because in the past when we've talked, it's been in 5, 6, 7 minute increments because it's been on TV. But here in the podcasting world, we have so much time, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. I thank you so much for doing this, and I hope we can chat again real soon, Mike. Thank you.
Anytime, Jason. I enjoy it every single time. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. And folks, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in to episode 12 of the Philly Sports Convo, and we'll catch you next time. Stay connected with us on social media. Join our Discord community and grab merch from our shop. The Philly Sports Convo is a Blue Eye Visual production.